So welcome to our first webinar for the year. It's Navigating Change with Clarity and Confidence with Lata Hamilton. My name is Carly Shearman and I'm the Community Manager here at Women in Digital. If you're new to the Women in Digital community, welcome. I guess what we're all about here is connecting, educating and empowering our way to diversity in digital. So today's webinar, as you probably know because you're here, is we're going to explore the fascinating world of change management and leadership. So we're living in a digital society where there's AI, automation, emerging technologies all the time, and it's quickly evolving kind of what the future of work looks like. And I guess you kind of throw a pandemic into that. And the truth is a lot of people and businesses are struggling with uncertainty that comes from transformational and organizational change. And while change can be scary, and I will put my hand up and say that I do not like change, it's probably the most common thing I talk about in my one-on-ones with my boss. It's kind of a necessity, like it's no longer like a nice to have skill set, but a must have. And being able to build that clarity and confidence in that space has never been so important or kind of so timely as we head into 2021. So this morning, we are joined by transformation and change coach, Lata Hamilton, and she is our industry expert. And this morning, she's going to be taking us through a quick crash course. It is such a meaty topic, but we're going to try and cover it just over the next hour. So the things we're focusing on is what is this little thing called change management all about? The power that bringing change management into your leadership style can have. Exploring kind of common challenges that Lata sees in market when leading change, and kind of a snapshot of the skill sets used by change savvy leaders. And I guess lastly, I think what's going to be a great takeaway is kind of exploring ideas for you honing your own change skill set. But before we get into all of that, I think it's quite important that we introduce you to our special guest for the day. So Lata is an accredited senior change manager, but she's also a neuro-linguistic programming practitioner. And I had to practice saying that so many times because it's a mouthful. She's also an executive coach and a founder and CEO of her own company called Passion Pioneers. Having worked for the likes of Suncorp Group, ANZ, Woolworths, even the city of Parramatta, Lata is a true pocket rocket with a passion for empowering teams. But even more importantly, she loves working with women in leadership to kind of carve out their own paths in their career and kind of lead their own teams through change. So with generosity, honesty, and drive, Lata absolutely inspires others to achieve their dreams. And there's no one else more fitting to kind of host this webinar this morning. So for our members, you are probably familiar with how today works, but I will just recap it for our newbies. In a second, I'm going to hand you over to Lata and she will take over and share her own journey, but also kind of her experience in change management. And then at the end, I will jump back on and we'll do a live Q&A. And with that, Lata, we're going to give you a very warm welcome all the way from Sydney.
Thank you so much. It's really fantastic to be here and welcome everybody to what I believe is actually the first webinar for 2021. So great to have you all and such keen beans, I guess, you know, starting to come in, learn some new topics, build your own development and your own skills is really fantastic to have, I guess, a bit of a break and then like over sort of the holiday period and then come back and actually just fill that space that you've managed to create over that break time with really great, I guess, tools and techniques that can help to empower you as you move into the year. So thank you so much for having me today. We're going to get straight into it as I do want to cover as much as possible and also really get to your questions. So as Carly said, please do pop your questions. We're going to cover them all off at the end, but if they come up during the session, please do pop them in and keep using the chat and introduce yourself and meet each other. It's really great to sort of build a network and community on the webinar as well, and even to share some of your own experiences, any organizational changes that you've been through or any times where you have succeeded or, you know, done something really fantastic that's really helped your team to cope with change. Share those experiences because we can all learn and grow together, myself included. I'm still learning and growing too. So let's get started. I guess you know, if I was really thinking about where all of this really did get started, I'm a lot like a lot of you here. Like if you're on this webinar, you're here for a reason. I know that you're here because you love helping people, helping your teams, helping people in your life to grow, to develop, and to, I guess, kind of improve themselves, improve their work, improve their career, and just improve their lives generally. I attract a certain type of person to my webinars, and yeah, I kind of know that you sort of like me. And it really started very early for me. Even through school and uni, I would have so many different people, friends, family, coming to me for advice. They would come to me and they'd be like, Lata, you know, I want your advice or ideas on this. And I would be like, okay, cool. And I'd sit down with them and we'd talk through it. And I'm a really logical, rational person. So I would sort of give them these like logical, rational ideas and ways to move forward. And they'd be like, yes, that's absolutely right. And then they would kind of agree on this like rational, logical path forward that made a lot of sense to me, made a lot of sense to them. And then I would watch as they would go and like do the exact opposite thing and take me completely by surprise, and probably even themselves sometimes completely by surprise. Or even worse, sometimes they actually just wouldn't do anything at all. They would be so stuck and they would be so scared to even make any decision or make any move or take any action that they just wouldn't do anything at all. And then I noticed when I actually moved into my corporate career, I actually started out in marketing. And when I moved into marketing, I had all of these fantastic ideas and innovations that I wanted to sort of bring to life. I wanted to be this leader that people felt confident to follow, and this leader that people really kind of believed in and sort of trusted and would kind of get on board with my ideas. And I would find that while my ideas were really kind of like logical, they made sense, sometimes I would lose people along the way or people wouldn't come on board. And I would still sometimes execute on those ideas and bring them to life, but I would have done it on my own, and I would have kind of, you know, almost like a lone ranger, sort of achieved it on my own. And they were sort of still stuck back there. They hadn't come on the journey with me. So very quickly in my corporate career, I actually discovered neurolinguistic programming, which is a mouthful. So you've done really well, Carly. Neurolinguistic programming, which we call NLP for short, and coaching. And I discovered how to actually inspire people to change with me, and how to shake them up and wake them up and actually have them change with me, not just for now, but also well into the future. In change management, we call that sustaining change into the future, because there's no point kind of going on a roller coaster and kind of like, you know, getting people to change, but then having it drop off again, and getting people to change and having it drop off again. So I actually went and learnt NLP and coaching for myself to become a better leader, for myself to be able to grow in my career. I wanted to learn those tools and techniques to be more effective in the workplace. And I never planned on sort of doing anything like sharing or even having a business when I first signed up to learn NLP and coaching. It was just for me. And then when I actually moved into the space of change management, so I went from marketing into change management, which is all about helping people to change in their organizations, I actually just took all of those tools and techniques that I learned in NLP and coaching, and I brought them into the realm of change management. And I've been using those tools and techniques ever since to make the change work that I do more effective, to have it land better, to have people resonate better, and to feel good along the way. And so those are the sorts of the kind of way that I've gone. And again, like the way that I've sort of brought my NLP and coaching into change management, I never really planned to share that stuff. It was just the way that I kind of approach things, because I'm like, I have this awesome toolkit and skill set, like I should use it in the work that I'm doing. But last year I had a lot of people reaching out to me, asking for ideas on how they could improve the experience of their teams through change. They knew my background and things like that. And so I thought, well, maybe it's time to start sharing the magic a little bit. And that's what I really want to give to you today, is to share the magic of not just change management, which is a fantastic lens to view any kind of leadership development or activity or organizational change through, but also kind of pepper in that NLP and coaching, which really helps you get sustaining results and really approach things in a really creative way that is actually going to have lasting change for the people that you're working with or impacting. So that is well, it's not who I am, it's where I got to where I am, but who am I? This random person with quite big hair. I was just saying to Carly before this, I'm like, my hair seems to have turned into a frisball today. I do have a lot of hair. I am growing it out in order to sell it, like Joe of Little Women. So I am the founder and CEO of Passion Pioneers. My name is Lata Hamilton, and I am an accredited change manager, neurolinguistic programming practitioner, and I'm also an executive coach. And I live in Sydney, Australia. It's really beautiful here at the moment in January in summer. Oh, sorry, February now in summer. It's really nice weather at the moment. A little bit about me, I absolutely love food. Like I love food so much. I actually went to France a couple of years ago to do a 1-week cooking course. I'm an absolute foodie, and I'm also a cardio junkie. So I love swimming, I love running, I love skiing, I love yoga, all of those sorts of things. So I feel like those two things balance themselves out. And then also I'm an avid op shopper or thrift shopper. So even the dress that I'm wearing right now is a recycled treasure. I love going out looking for things, saving the planet, and also getting a bargain thrown into the mix as well. So I am the founder and CEO of Passion Pioneers, and we help leaders to carve their own path for change. And we especially like to work with leaders. We work with leaders who are doing any kind of organizational change and from any industry and business. We really, really enjoy and have a keen focus on working with leaders who might be going through digital transformation, especially where there might be a restructure or an operating model change, or maybe even sort of job loss thrown into the mix. I've worked on some really big changes, a lot of different types of changes. I've worked on everything from technology change to compliance change, digital transformation, cultural transformation. Like think of a type of organizational change and I've probably worked on it. And I've worked on big changes that have impacted like hundreds of thousands of people, that have like operating model changes that have impacted tens of thousands of people, and really exciting for me, changes that are actually changing the way that we work, like changing the future of how our teams set themselves up and how they structure themselves and how they structure their work, which is a real passion point for me. So that is what I do. And really today, I mean, not all of you are going to be trained in change management. So it's an opportunity. You probably have heard of it before, and it does form part of a lot of leadership courses now. If you're doing like an MBA or anything like that, often there'll be like a module on change management. But, you know, if you're not actually trained in change, it can be kind of hard to really even kind of properly know like what it is and why it's important to bring into your leadership that lens, and different things that you can do to actually support yourself through that. So change management, I love to just distill things down into like their simplest kind of definition. So I just say it's moving people from doing things in one way to doing things in another way within your organization. So change management can impact your customers or your clients, your community, investors, shareholders, absolutely. Like organizational changes, things that you're doing inside the organization can have that ripple and that flow on effect. But generally change management does kind of have that internal focus on your employees, your team members. And it's moving people from doing things in one way to doing things in a new way. So it can be any kind of organizational change. And on the screen, I've popped a few up there for you. It can be a new process. It can be a new system, a new technology, a new application, any of those types of things, and all of the processes that also change alongside that. It could be a new product that you're launching to the market, or a changed product, or even removing a product from the market. That's a change in itself. Or a service, obviously, as well. And then also a new team structure. It could even be the move to remote work, which a lot of us experienced last year during COVID. So all of these are examples of organizational change where your people are going to have to do something differently. And change management is almost like the bridge to get them from what they were doing before to what you need them to be doing in the future, but to actually be supporting them through it, having them feel informed, having them feel ready, having them feel confident for the change that's coming. And that is what change management is about. It's actually about the experience that those people are going through. And I think one of the reasons that I am actually such a great change manager is because I've had that experience in marketing, because I've had that focus on customer experience. I'm able to kind of always bring that experience mindset to the forefront, even, almost treating your own internal team as customers. And we do it usually through 3 different kind of, I guess, key activities. Like there's a lot more that sort of sits behind change management. But kind of 3 big tenets of it is communications. That could be verbal communications, written communications, any type of communications really through any channel or format. Training, so that could be anything from facilitated training sessions to self-learning to, FAQs or guides or anything to do with, I guess, kind of building skills and knowledge. And then the third area, which is probably something that people don't really think about a lot, but it's so critical. Like, I actually think it's probably one of like the critical part of change is business readiness. And that is, does the team have everything that they need in order to be able to launch this change successfully and accept it successfully, and also then embed it into the future? So change management isn't about just launching. There is a lot of focus on launches, and trust me, when you're working on projects, like I know that launches feel like the end goal and like, the finish line. But change management is actually about going into the future. It's about sustaining whatever transformation you've had that team go through and sustaining that into the future so that they don't bounce back, so that they don't, kind of resist, or they don't, like after you've kind of finished your change, that they don't then go back to the old way of doing things, because what's the point then? You've just wasted a whole heap of time, probably a whole heap of money. And it's also not a great experience for your team because they're going back and forth and they're not there with you. So you can see then why neurolinguistic programming and coaching is really fantastic to bring into the realm of change management, because it's helping you get that sustainable shift in behavior, that sustainable shift in mindset, and also just having people go through a really great experience where they feel empowered and they feel like sometimes even that the change was their idea. Amazing buy-in. So NLP, if you don't know much about it, there's a whole heap of information out there. It's the excellence in behavior, what we do, communications, how we speak to ourselves and other people, and psychology, or your emotions. And the psychology and emotions part is really important because that is really why a lot of people resist change. And that's what we're going to be focusing on the most in today's webinar. And so I do change management and executive coaching through Passion Pioneers, blending these 2 together. That's what I really love doing, just, making something really magical by bringing in all of the different tools and techniques that we have at our disposal. Now, I'm not going to go through all of this, but I did want to just provide you with a little bit of background as to why change management is suddenly becoming like a buzzword in industries and in leadership. It's because there's actually a whole heap of research out there around how improved success can be and sustained performance when you bring change management into the mix. So you might want to take a screenshot of this slide just to kind of, if you ever kind of need to try and share your case for why change management is so important. Some of these stats can be really helpful. So I've given you the sources there too. And I really love this one, which is like the calculated ROI on large projects. So if say you invested 100K on a change manager for the space of 6 months, let's just say you invested that, the return on investment that you would get of value because you had that change manager, the return on investment is like $650,000 worth. And the reason why is because not only have you launched successfully and gotten all of the team on board, ready, informed, and confident, but you also then sustain that change into the future, and you don't waste money down the track having to like tidy up loose ends or having your team revert back. And let me give you an example. When I was working in one organization, 2 years prior to me starting there, they had launched all of these tablets out and a new application on these tablets for a team to do their work on. And then 2 years afterwards, I'm there and we're doing the same thing again. Out of about 100 tablets, like only like 10 were still being used by the team 2 years later. And out of that time, like the feedback from the team was terrible. They didn't like the tablets, they didn't like the app, the tablets kept breaking down. That the first time they had launched, they hadn't had a real change management focus. And so 2 years later, they were having to invest all of that money again, all of that time, all of that effort and attention, as well as rebuild trust with that team. Because why would the team then want to take a new type of tablet and be like, well, the last one you gave us wasn't great? So there was a lot of change management work to do. It was around building trust and doing that. And to kind of give you an indication as to how change management can really help a change like that, by the time I was finishing up on that change, people were asking for new features on the new tablets that they'd gotten in the new application, which is a sign that not only were they using it, but they were like, we want to make sure that we use this into the future. Can you add this, 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 and this, which I think is a fantastic sign. So why change management? It's because people are at the heart of every organization. Like, yes, we have a lot of technology today. Absolutely, we do. But everything that we do is for people and by people. Everything. Like, even the technology that you use, it's been designed by people. So people are still the reason that we wake up in the morning. People are still the reason that our organizations function and work and our businesses run. And so people do the work and they do it to just benefit people, whether that's investors, shareholders, clients, customers, whoever it happens to be. I like to use the example, like, even something like save the whales. We're saving the whales because people believe that whales should be saved. The whales themselves obviously would want to be saved as well. but like, it's because of our perception. It's because of what we want, our desires, that we do anything really in life. And people, as Carly kind of mentioned, people do prefer stability. They resist change because it's unknown to them. It's foreign. They don't know what is going to happen to them and where they're going to fall when the change is complete. And so they resist it. They try not to have to change. They try to, pull out of the training sessions. Oh, I was sick that day. They try to avoid having to actually do things in the new way and do workarounds instead. And just keep doing the way that they did it in the past. Like, yeah, okay, maybe you have gone paperless and you've gone digital, but they might keep writing their reports on paper. Little things like that to resist change, or sometimes just bullying and harassment, even through changes and operating model changes and restructures that really rears its head, which is so disappointing. So you've got this exciting future vision, but people not wanting to come on board. They're either stuck or actively resisting, going and running in the opposite direction. And it's because of their emotions. I talked about that when we talked about NLP. It's because of their emotions. And the really interesting thing, people aren't robots. We aren't machines. So you can throw to people, including myself. Like, I see myself doing this too. Like, you can throw me all the logical reasons in the world, all the rational reasons in the world, but I might close my ears. Like, my ears hear them, but my brain doesn't process them because my emotions have taken over. And so what we need to be doing is actually looking at what's going on psychologically internally with people when change is coming their way, and how can we combat the emotional side and then help them to buy into all of the logical, rational reasons. It's flipping it on its head a little bit. And I mentioned it before that change management helps people feel inspired, confident, and ready for the change, and to want to continue doing it into the future. So screenshot this slide. I think it's really, really helpful. Like, I don't usually get people to screenshot a lot of slides, but this one just kind of cements it for you and helps you to it's a really good one pager to kind of refer back to in the future. So you've probably got a lot of skill sets of change management already. Like, change management isn't something you go to university. Like, you don't pick change management out of high school and go be a change manager. Most change managers come in from a whole heap of different directions and places. I came in through marketing. Other people might come in through communications. Other people might come in through operations, through project management, through all of these different places. But once you're in change management, there's a whole heap of skill sets that really set you up for success as a change manager. And so if you can bring some of these skill sets that sort of change managers know and use into your leadership, you're halfway there, because the skill sets are the really kind of important thing. I often say change isn't about the tools and the templates that you use. Like, you'll hear a lot of people talk about impact assessments and change plans and blah, 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 blah. Like, that's all great. And yes, some of that is very, very useful, but change management is actually an approach. And if there's one thing that I want you to walk away from today, it's that change management is an approach. It's an experience. It's a way of looking at the plan for your team, or the launch for your team, or the project for your team. It's a way of looking at that and going, how can we have our people be informed, confident, and ready about this? And how can we give them the best experience possible through it? So some of these skill sets are really, at the forefront when you are working in change management. And it's a lot of the skill sets that you'll see on jobs for change managers and things like that. So building relationships, rapport, so much of, because people are so fearful around change, it's about building that trust. So being able to build relationships and building them really quickly is really, really key when you're working in change management. And you'll see here as well, I should probably also say, sometimes people think that change management is really fluffy. Like you've heard me say the word people probably already 100 times, and like the webinar's only halfway through. But it is got that huge focus on people. Absolutely, it does. However, it's not as fluffy as you think it is. Change management, the other half, the other 50% of change management, is actually the results that you get. It's actually the performance from having that change launch successfully. It's your project or your client actually getting the KPIs, or meeting the KPIs that they had set, or meeting the benefits or the outcomes as to why they were doing that project in the first place. And obviously it's also sustaining those results into the future. There's no point delivering something if it's going to wind back 6 months later. So change management has got that real people focus, and it's also really, really almost operational, and strategic. It's also really, really kind of focused on those hard metrics and measures. And a really big part of change management is actually about tracking and measuring success. And it might be change success, but that has a flow-on impact to business success. So let's go through the people skill sets first. So it's building relationships, stakeholder management, really, really critical. And, sometimes projects don't have that focus on stakeholders. And so people, I've worked on projects where people have just popped up out of the woodwork, just before launch, and then just completely railroaded a change. So you want to actually have that focus on stakeholders early on, so that you can be prepared for that and actually make sure that you're bringing people along the journey with you. And that's a really key point. It's not about shoving something to people. Change isn't done to people, it's done with people. And we say exactly the same thing about NLP and coaching. It's done with people, not to people. It's not a process that's done to, it's a process that's done with. You heard me already mention communications and training. You don't have to be a communications expert or a training expert, but you need to have that sort of consideration and lens. Leadership, because when you're leading change, it's just so powerful. So any other leadership tools, techniques, experience that you have, skills that you have, you can bring into the mix. Psychology and strategy are both really powerful to have, in the area of change management. And then on the results side, having any kind of experience in projects, because most change is projects. Change is ever constant and it's always around us. But when we're thinking really about organizational change, we're talking about kind of the big bucket items. So they're usually kind of more in a project structure. There's a start and a finish, and it's a very kind of dedicated, usually a dedicated team and a dedicated workforce, delivering that one piece of work. This is often missed. And it's the really important part around processes. It's understanding, what do people do right now, and what do we want them to do in the future, and how do we want them to do it, and have we set them up to be able to do it? Let me give you an example. If you want people to start going paperless and digital, how can you ensure that the platform that you're going to be using has enough space for things like videos? Videos take up so much memory, right? They are they've so much the file sizes are so big. So if you want people to always be digital and paperless in your organization, you need to be accommodating for all types of files, not just Word documents or Google documents. So that's like an example. You've got to really think through, and then how do you get that file up? Maybe it would, overturn a thing. So maybe there's a different pathway to get that video file into that platform that you're going to be using. Any kind of planning skills that you have, execution and events. Again, my background in marketing was awesome to be able to apply that, because when we are going to launch a change, we want to make it exciting, and we want people to, be really excited by it and inspired, and we want to bring it to life in a new way and shake people up and wake them up and have them realize that something cool's just about to happen. So anything around the event space is awesome. And then just being able to deliver stuff, because you've got to deliver. It's a project, right? You've got to deliver. Tracking and reporting is also really, really critical. It's about going, well, like, what are our metrics that we want to measure? How will we know that we've been successful? Because we can do a lot of stuff, but if we don't actually track and measure and monitor it, then how do we know that we've been successful? And what I always say is not just after launch, but actually well into the future. Where are your next signposts? Are they going to be, 3 months, 6 months, 12 months, 2 years? You're going to keep tracking and measuring to see, has your change actually lasted sustainably? Is there any more embedding activities that we need to be able to pull in to do that? And then celebrating success, because change management is really focused often around the projects, I should say. Projects are really tough. Like they're very, very focused, a lot of work and a lot of sustained effort for a short amount of time. So it's really important, being a change manager, to make sure that the people who are working on the change are taking care of themselves and that they're actually celebrating along the way too. So if you looked at this list of skills, what I'd love for you to just have a think through now is, well, how many of these do you already have? Because you guys might not be change experts, but you're leaders. And so you probably have a ton of these skill sets already, which means you're 50% of the way there, because you're already starting to be able to apply some of these skill sets to the work that you do and the leading of teams or any organizational changes that might be coming up for you. And then I mentioned this before, but, we do focus a lot on customers and our clients. We'll go above and beyond for them. We'll, rock up and, at 10 o'clock at night on meetings and things like that. So think about how you can treat your team. How can you create that same experience or that same devotion and commitment to your team, and think of a change like an internal marketing campaign, because that's really what it is all about. And it's more than just the launch. It's about all the lead up and the build up to launch and getting people prepared and ready. Then it's the launch, and then it's what happens post. So there are some skill sets. And then why is it so critical right now? You heard me mention this a couple of times, like a big, big focus for Passion Pioneers is digital transformation. And I think more than ever, it's really important that leaders everywhere are starting to think about things through this change lens, through this mindset of change, about how they can actually support their teams through really, really difficult changes that can bring up a lot of fear and a lot of anxiety. And I'm specifically talking about job loss. So we know that last year, the World Economic Forum actually predicted that 75 million jobs would be lost within 10 years. So by 2030, 75 million jobs worldwide would be lost because technology, digital transformation, such as automation and artificial intelligence, would pretty much just wipe away those jobs. We are becoming better and better and better at actually being so efficient through technology that we don't need people to be doing a lot of manual tasks anymore, or even complex tasks now. Like, that's the whole point, right, of AI and machine learning. Even complex tasks can actually be outsourced to robots and technology. And, that was only last year that the World Economic Forum came out with that, but it's not new news. Like, specialists have been predicting this for ages. Like in Australia, the Committee for Economic Development predicted in 2015, like 5 years ago now, that 5 million jobs in Australia could be lost in the next 10 to 15 years. That was in 2015, which ironically was the same year that Bill Gates predicted a global pandemic, probably respiratory pandemic, that we wouldn't be prepared for. So you can go watch that TED talk from Bill. But it might not seem like a lot, like, okay, yeah, 5 million jobs. That's 40% of the workforce in Australia whose jobs will be impacted by digital transformation. 40% of roles that could be lost to technology, digital machines. So this is really actually a trend that's moving upwards. People are finally starting to focus on it. But we've had years where these predictions have been in place and we hadn't been actively preparing. Governments and businesses and leaders haven't been actively preparing for a scenario, a situation where millions of people could be losing their jobs. And we're talking all industries and really different types of roles, complete like roles just overturning overnight. And I think that's why it's so important now that we really focus on understanding this experience of people through change and actually being the one. So from my perspective, and it's so fantastic to have so many of you here on today's webinar, because it's like, you are the people who care, right? Like the fact that you're here, you care about the experience of your teams and the experience of your people and the workforce. And to me, I think that it's up to us as the people who care to actually help our teams cope with the job loss and the career crisis that they're going to find themselves in. We need to be able to help them. We need to use our skills to help them reimagine the future, to upskill and to reskill, because yes, a lot of jobs will be taken away, but a lot of new jobs are going to be opening up and creative and innovative work that will be available to be done. But we need to have our people coming along that change with us, instead of being so resistant that they either run in the opposite direction or do nothing at all. So it's up to us, and this is, I guess, kind of part of my call to action. Like, we get the chance to write our future and to lead our teams confidently through the change that we know is coming in our workforce. So I'll just jump off my soapbox for a second. You can see I get very worked up about this, but I think it's so, so, so important. And I just think that we've got so much opportunity in the future. So I've spoken about this a little bit, so I don't want to labor on it too much, but what happens during change? What goes on in our psychology? What do we think? How do we feel? What goes on? So the real fear that happens with change is usually actually a fear of loss. It's a fear of loss of power or of control. It's a fear of not knowing where you'll fit in the future. It's a fear of not knowing if you'll have a job in some cases, if it's an operating model or restructure change. And it's a fear of just the unknown sometimes as well. Like, it's just like, I feel really comfortable with how things have been going. Why do we need to change? We prefer stability. We're literally, as humans, we're hardwired to prefer stability because it keeps us safe. And any type of change kind of threatens that safety. And it triggers our survival instinct. So it triggers our flight, fight, and freeze response. And so, you'll get the flight, you'll get people who exit your organization if the change is just too overwhelming. You'll get people who fight, who just actively resist or potentially bring in some of those really toxic behaviors, such as bullying or harassment or gossiping, rumor mongering. And then also people who freeze, people who just try not to do anything at all. They might, try and be absent. They might try to just avoid having to go through the change. And that's all our survival instinct, right? Like, we are sort of have a lot of these animalistic urges where our bodies are still often run by emotions, which is what sort of NLP and coaching is really looking to sort of tackle and help transform. And so if we know that it's an emotional response to change, then what that means is that we actually need to tackle it with an emotional solution. And this is really where I bring so much NLP into the change management work that I do. We need people to start to make new decisions. And it has to be a new decision about the change. So instead of deciding that it's going to mean that I lose power because suddenly I won't have 3 people working under me, I might only have 1. Oh, that's a loss of power maybe. We need to have that be a new decision and be like, okay, yeah, I'm only going to have 1 person working under me. However, I have now got peers that I'm now able to collaborate with, and actually I'm able to utilize the resources in their teams as well, and we're able to get even more done. So it's a complete reframe. And in marketing, we do it a lot as well. It's reframing what it means to people, planting those new decisions into people's minds about what this change is going to mean for them. But all decisions are made by a change in feeling. You have to change that fear into inspiration or into excitement or into commitment or into any kind of feeling that is going to actually have them make that decision. And so how do we change feelings? By changing the meaning of what it means to us. So we have to be able to provide opportunities for people to talk, discuss, float. We have to provide different ways of looking at things that is not just the logical, rational decisions. And so we want to change the meaning for people. And in NLP, that's literally what we say. All change, whether it's internal, psychological, emotional, whether it's personal in your life, whether it's organizational in your organization, or professional in your career, all change is a change in meaning. If you change the meaning, you can change everything else after that. And so that's what I want to be able to share with you, a model today that if you kind of think about your changes through this lens, that you'll actually be able to start to get some really good rungs on the ladder when it comes to getting your people on board, buying into the change that you might be leading them through. We've talked about this already, so I won't go in there. But I do talk about a lot about this one. I talk about, it's not about managing change, it's about inspiring change. And, you know, which is ironic because change management is called change management, and it is literally, you know, a discipline in and of itself and a profession in and of itself, managing change. But the word management to me just makes it seem like it's a problem. It's like, I have another saying, which is like, you know, manage problems, lead people, or manage problems, inspire people. Like, people are not there to be managed. They're not problems to be managed. Instead, manage the risks and manage the problems and inspire and lead people to change. So it's a small kind of like reframe, but even that small reframe like could help you make some new decisions about change, about how to actually get people buying into it. So the model that I want to leave you with today, I'd already told you at the start of this that I'm going to throw like so much at you. You're probably sitting there going, oh my God, does she ever stop talking? I will when we get to question time. And do make sure that you pop the questions into the Q&A function of the webinar, so that we can get to those towards the end. But the model that I want to leave you with today is vibrant change. So, and this is where I've really kind of pulled this NLP and coaching side right into it. And the first part of vibrant change is this vision. And this is one of the things that I love the most about coaching. I love it so much. Like whenever I'm working with any leadership team, whenever I'm working with any client, we always start by setting them this really exciting and inspiring vision around what the future looks like. Because coaching is all about coaching into future goals, we always need to start with that picture of what we actually want for the future. It's the best part of coaching and something that I love so much. And I love taking leadership teams through it, because instead of just getting one person's vision of what that future looks like, we're able to collaborate and contribute and actually have a joint group vision of the future. That's one of the sessions that I run for teams and for leaders particularly, and it's just so powerful. So we remember, we want to inspire change. So we need to inspire, we need to start with that inspiring and empowering vision, but specifically around what the team experience is going to be. Because often projects will have very strategic visions, or organizations will have very strategic visions, but they're not necessarily about the team experience. So that's really what we want to be focusing on when we're writing this vision. Second, a big part of change management or change inspiration, maybe I should start saying that, is assessing stakeholders and assessing the impacts. Impacts are pretty much is just a fancy word for saying what's going to happen to these people. What are they going to have to do differently, or what might occur to them that we might need to think about how we support them through. That's all that it means. And a big part of change management as well is about risks. So seeing and identifying those risks up front, what could impact the team's experience? What could create resistance? What could have people not want to embed this and not want to continue doing it in the future? And how can we resolve that through the course of the change instead of waiting for the end when the risk has already eventuated and become an issue? Then we build. So you heard me mention it before, we usually build a change plan. You're leaders, you can all build these plans. It's like taking a project plan, but putting a people lens on the top of it instead. So it's like, what are you going to do for your people? And that's the comms, training, what support do you need to provide? What activities are you going to do to embed? Readiness, which I've mentioned already before. So it's getting all of your support in place. And a really key thing as leaders for you is making sure that you're not just focused on the end team members, like the more junior members of your team. You really need to also make sure that you're thinking about maybe your middle managers and the sort of the next level down from you, because they might actually need different support to the end team. So what can you do to actually make sure that they're set up for success for the change as well? Act. So you obviously need to, this is usually like launch, announce your activities, get started, get the ball rolling on what it is that you're doing. And here's where the rubber really hits the road. But then so quickly and all the way through, you need to start noticing. You know, to notice your results. This is another thing that I've sort of borrowed from NLP. In NLP, it's actually a fancy word. It's called sensory acuity. And I'll say that again, sensory acuity. But what that means in NLP is we work with a client. If we're working one-on-one with a client, we want to notice what's going on. Like, when do we know we've had that change in meaning happen? When do we know that we've had that shift and that transformation in their psychology or in their emotions? And we want to do the same thing with our change, right? We want to notice the results that we're getting, the engagement, the feedback, and any unexpected consequences, anything that kind of pops up randomly for you. And then lastly, through. My last name is Hamilton. It is a Scottish last name, and I borrowed this from that because all Scottish clans have like a tartan, like a fabric tartan, as well as like a crest, and our motto is through on our crest. And this is all like just bringing to the forefront the fact that you need to make sure that you're supporting that change long after launch. Launch is not the be all and end all. You want to embed those activities, and especially try to focus on activities that are really going to build trust, because people will have been disrupted through the change. People will have been like, oh, everything's new and different. Maybe it's not so scary anymore, but it's still new and different. And so it's really around bringing that trust so that you can actually succeed into the future. So some questions, and I can actually see these questions already coming up into the chat. So some questions that I often get on a webinar like this. Oh, the sun's coming in behind me. Do I need to be accredited in change management in order to bring like change into my leadership? And the answer is no. Like I mentioned, you can bring tools and techniques, you can bring those skill sets in, and you can still like have a fantastic kind of and lead change through that lens. You don't have to actually go and be accredited and do the course and, you know, be formally accredited and stuff like that. What if I'm not comfortable with change? How do I instill that confidence in my team? Very, very good question. Well, with this one, I'm going to talk about that in a second, actually. A common question that I get is, how do I maintain the motivation of my team, especially through long changes? So changes that might last for, say, 6 months or a year. Like, that's a really long time for people to be going through change. They can feel burnt out. They can feel fatigued from the change. And so it's about breaking that change up into smaller chunks and actually kind of addressing it in phases. And again, just keeping those feedback loops open and doing things along the way, obviously, to inspire people and have them interacting and being part of it. And then often also people ask me, how do I work with you? How do I work with Passion Pioneers? We'll talk about that in a second as well. So back to that question, if I'm not comfortable with change. So even Carly kind of admitted she finds it really hard, and we are all human. So it's absolutely normal for you as a leader to have your own fears about change or your own struggles when change comes your way. Sometimes even if it's a change that you've instigated, even if it's a change that you're logically, rationally, fully on board with, you can still have that same reaction as everybody else because you're a human too. So what I would suggest is that change leadership actually starts with you. Instead of focusing on the team first, bring it back to you, focus on you. And I've popped some things up that you can kind of start to do to, I guess, kind of start to build your own comfort with change, your own clarity and confidence as a leader, as a leader who leads change, to actually build your clarity and confidence. Because when you build that energy within yourself, that just ripples out to the people that you work with. It ripples out to your team. And again, it gets them on the journey before you've even done anything, because they're a direct reflection of your energy. So it's about having self-awareness, being really clear on where you've come from, where you are now, and then also where you want to go in the future. It's about having that clarity around transferable skills. And that's important for anybody who's working, full stop. Regardless of digital transformation and job loss, transferable skills are a must-have in today's day and age and workforce. Being really clear on your values and the organization's values as well, but really your values. Because again, when you get really clear on this and really confident and you own it and you put those boundaries in place, that ripples out to your team too. And it means that you're seeding this stuff to your team without even having to formally do anything with them. Your beliefs around your leadership, your beliefs around change, your beliefs around your career, your beliefs around the world, around, the industry that you work in, any beliefs that might actually be impacting your ability to jump on board with change. Your own personal brand, which as a leader is really powerful. And because I've got a marketing background, I love this, really, really love helping leaders come up with their own personal brand, but really also then embody that and live it. It's just so fantastic. And then resilience. I think after the year that we've had last year, resilience is something that is resounding, and it's something to always be working on. How do you bounce back from adversity? How do you bounce back from challenge, and what tools and techniques and approaches can you use to do that? So that is the end of the formal part of the webinar. And what I would suggest, if you do kind of want to work with me or find out more about Passion Pioneers, jump over to our website, sign up to the mailing list. A little pop-up will come up, and the very first step in change leadership starting with you is self-awareness. And I've still got the bonus up there, which is my 2020 reflection journal. It allows you to reflect on 2020, but then there's also a few questions that have you looking forward to 2021. So really good for you to be doing it at the very start of this year. So jump across there, sign up to the mailing list. I send out a weekly newsletter with stuff around change and leadership. And I also often kind of communicate the upcoming programs that I'm running or any offers that I have and things like that as well. So on that note, you can also stay connected with me, find the website, find me on LinkedIn. Just let me know that you were on this webinar and I'll accept your request. And yeah, you can also email me as well. And then as we go into question time with Carly, if you want to pop in the chat, what was your best thing from today? What's your key insight? What was one of your key takeaways from the webinar today? What was something that you found really insightful or inspiring, or just something that you really loved? So if you want to pop that in the chat as we start our Q&A session off.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Lata. That was great. We're definitely getting questions coming through. So I guess starting off with, how specifically can each of us prepare ourselves for all the change that is happening in the world of work? And I guess kind of building that ability to absorb that change and then also being able to do something with it.
Absolutely. Like I mentioned, it really does start with you. It starts with you just being really clear, because when you're really clear and confident on your place in the world, like sometimes I think it feels like you're like an island and you've got these raging oceans around you, right? And that's change. And it's like, if you feel like you are constantly being bombarded by those oceans, then it's really hard. But if you're able to actually just center yourself, be really clear on who you are, what you're here to do, what your purpose is, what you're here to do as a leader, and get really clear with all of that stuff, as well as start to think maybe a little bit, what might happen in the future and how would I tackle that? And arm yourself with skills, or arm yourself with approaches or opportunities even for the future. Then you can really start to calm those waters around you. And again, like you can stop feeling like an island maybe, and actually start feeling like maybe like a ship or a boat, where you actually choose to navigate where you want to go, and then you can take people along with you on that as well.
I like that. I definitely like that. And I guess on that note, everyone really seemed to love the idea of NLP. Are there any courses or any kind of resources that you recommend for people kind of wanting to learn more about that skill and that space?
Yeah, absolutely. What I'd suggest is connect with me on LinkedIn, and I can send you some information and stuff like that. So just let me know that you were on this webinar today, connect with me on LinkedIn, and yeah, we can go from there.
Yeah, perfect. And how do you go about recovering trust if the change has already taken place and people are in a state of fear?
Yeah, this is such a good question. And it was funny, that change that I mentioned earlier about the tablets. Like, I literally was sitting in the office and I'm like, I feel like we need to like rebuild trust with this team. And so I Googled like ways to rebuild trust. And there were like 5 sort of like tips there, but the one that really stuck out for me, and we actually put this into action on that change, was to apologize. So if you know that you've done something wrong, or maybe you just haven't provided the support that your people have needed in the past, it's about owning that, being vulnerable, and being willing to say, yeah, we haven't been doing a great job of this, or yeah, that wasn't great, and we want to improve it for the future. And owning that. People aren't stupid, and your team is not stupid. They can see through all of the whitewash that comes from a lot of, corporate communications and fluffy kind of strategic language and words. They can see through it, and they make up their own decisions when you're not clear with them, when you're not being really authentic, I guess, in what you're saying to your team. They can see through it, they make up their own decisions, and that's where you get a lot of resistance. So apologize and keep those lines of communication open. That is the number one way of building trust. Is about having multiple different types of feedback channels, and then also playing that feedback back. You don't have to do everything with all the feedback that you get, but you do need to be able to tell people, here's what we have done and here's what we're choosing not to do, or actually, because people don't like putting feedback into a black hole, then they feel like actually that's still really inauthentic. But they would be my top tips for trust.
I love that. And I think it kind of, what's coming to mind is like how gaslit has kind of hit the like vernacular of everyone now. Like everyone kind of says, oh, I'm feeling like someone's gaslighting me, or whatever that looks like. And I've definitely had managers in the past that rather than just being upfront and honest, they've kind of tried to sweep it under the rug.
Yeah.
Like, I just can't connect and work with that.
Yeah. And it's a shame really, because once you do that and that trust is broken, then when you do go to ask for feedback, it can be really hard, because people are like, well, I don't believe that you're going to do the right thing by me and by this. And people are people. We just want to feel connected. We want to feel trusted, and we want to be inspired. So many, like, don't underestimate the power that you have as a leader to inspire your team. They are looking for somebody to follow. They are looking for you to stand up and be that leader. So be that for them, and build that relationship, because it goes both ways. You'll also enjoy the experience of being a leader when you've built that authenticity and that trust with your team.
Yeah, I love that. 2 more questions and then we will wrap up, as I appreciate everyone's either got lunch or work to go back to. But how can managers support staff through change while also simultaneously taking care of themselves? Like, are there strategies to disconnect and kind of make sure your mindset is good first?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's where a lot of sort of really focusing on preparing for the change and giving yourself a long lead time for the change, so that you can actually start to support your managers really early on by building up what I call their armor. Like, it's almost like not arming them for change, but like armoring them for change. Build them up well in advance, get them onto leadership trainings, get them an executive coach, or send them out to learn these skills, or bring people in to help do this and actually teach them the skill sets, the same sorts of skill sets around resilience and self-awareness and things like that, to help prepare for them. And then have that change lens, and just remember that they also need to go through an experience too, and you need to provide for them as well.
Yeah. All right, final one for the day. How might you deal with stubbornness rather than fear? So I guess when looking at change management, there definitely is that fight or flight. But what about just plain stubbornness?
Yeah, you have to investigate why the stubbornness is happening.
Yeah.
What's actually underlying behind it? And again, this is sort of something that we do a lot in NLP. It's like an onion, like peeling back the layers, like what's really going on there? And I think at the bottom of a lot of stubbornness, you'll see fear. You'll find fear at the bottom of it. It's just presenting in a different way.
It's kind of like locking their heels in because they're scared of the unknown.
Yeah. And so again, it's like a lot of the programs that I run and webinars and stuff that I do, we kind of explore those, and we actually like come up with all of these ideas around how you can actually then put those things into action.
Yeah, wow, very cool. Awesome. Well, look, I feel like we have just scratched the surface of such a meaty topic. But thank you so much for sharing your time with us this morning. Definitely do jump on to passionpioneers.com.au to download that reflection journal. I know I'll be doing that this weekend. And I guess if you have any questions, send them our way and we'll put you in touch with Lata if you haven't connected with her on LinkedIn. Awesome.
Thank you so much for having me.
Have a good day, everyone. We'll talk to you soon.